Do a song for you that's a true story. I went into a little church up in West Virginia one time, and this feller looked at me when I brought that banjo in, and this is the story, a true story with my hand up. This fella came up and put his hand out and began right off to inquire about the fact that I'd brought an old banjo into the church house. He seemed a bit cross and I wasn't sure why, so I just up and asked the guy what the problem was, and he reared up on me like a field mouse. He said, maybe it's me, but it sure seems odd that you'd bring that thing into the house of God. Well, I don't think it's appropriate for worship here. And I'm sure he could tell from the look in my eye that it caught me off guard, but to his surprise, I just smiled, shook his hand, said, brother, have no fear. See, I'd given some heed to that very thought, and I remember in Sunday school I was taught, in the book of Psalms, it'll tell you how to offer praise. It said praise him with horns and drums and things, and cymbals and instruments with strings. They even had tambourines back in the Bible days. Well, the harp, we're told, was David's choice. It's got a number of strings, of course, like this old banjo here, so it seems to me. And the banjo's rather a curious thing. It's a drum and a harp with 4 or 5 strings kind of mixed up in one. Now, wouldn't you have to agree? So he sighed real big with his hands on his hip. He snarled his nose and tightened his lips, and he said, I guess you think you're smart. Sure seems so. Well, I wasn't real sure what I ought to say, so I didn't say nothing. I just started to play When We All Get to Heaven, right there on that old banjo. While I was playing, something funny took place. A wee little grin came across his face, and I saw him tapping his toe, keeping time to the song. Then some other folks, they got up and gathered around, and I just broke into higher ground. And they started clapping their hands, and they kept singing along. After I was through playing, that old brother looked back. He saw that the front end of the church was packed, and there was people smiling in that church like they hadn't seen in years. So he shook his hand out for a second time. So I shook his, and he shook mine, and I knew right then that old banjo had calmed his fears. So David, get your golden harp, and Gabriel, let her blow. But when I come to praise the Lord, I'll just play the banjo. Here it is.